Do another video about Vonnegut. Currently, I'm reading his book called Dead Eye Dick, which I've read Slapstick, Slaughterhouse 5, Hocus Pocus, Cat's Cradle, Breakfast of Champions, and this is the next one I'm reading. And after this, I'll read Galapagos. So, in this video, I want to talk about the concept of Lonesome No More, which I guess I want to talk about two novels of his. The first one is Slapstick. The other one is Cat's Cradle. And I guess I want to talk about a theme in a few of his works. Slapstick and Cat's Cradle being two of them, that togetherness does improve the world. In every single novel of Vonnegut's, there is a bit of a aspect or a certain theme in there that the world is a very messy and a very messy and risky place to be in, and it's just messy in that it's very difficult to clean up those messes. And in some of his works, there is some bit of an aspect or a bit of a theme that we do have the possibility of changing that a little bit, but then and then in some other works, no way, it's just going to be like that, and you have to understand that. So, first of all, the concept of Lonesome No More comes from Slapstick. Hopefully I won't give any spoilers to those two books, Slapstick and Cat's Cradle. I'll get to what this has to do with Cat's Cradle here in a bit. With Slapstick, there was the main character plus his sister, who were very, very weird creatures, and basically, that Slapstick was the very first book by Vonnegut I have read, and I was very, very appalled and very, very, very happy that I had read it, because it was a great book, and the whole thing was that I know they were two very, very weird creatures, almost mentally disabled, but just very, very odd, and their parents hated them, and they basically would write things together. Him and his sister, they would put their heads together and write things, and they were better when they were together. Unfortunately, later in the book, they did end up splitting apart. Hopefully, I shouldn't have said that, but they did split apart, and they were lesser as they were apart, and they were not as good as they were when they were together when they were young. And him and his sister wrote this little paper or whatever that was called Lonesome No More, which had this, I guess, a social theory about how there should be families, but not in the sense of a blood-related family, but a family where we bring a lot of people in together in one sort of circular relation of people, to where it would be better if we all were linked up in these big families, and thus you would be lonesome no more. And that's very, very interesting, I think. And I think in a way that Vonnegut in his works does try to argue, not argue, but does try to say in a way that, if there was more togetherness, or was more, or less division between people, things would be better. And even the concept of how and even the thing about how him and his sister, when they were apart, they were lesser beings, and they were less intelligent, and they were lesser themselves. Though the concept of the idea of those two being together and being better together is another way of thinking of togetherness and less division as being better than division between people. And I would have to agree entirely. I think it's very, very true that if there's less division and more togetherness and more linking up of people, I guess, into certain empathetic circles or empathic circles of people, or via the families in that way. And I don't think that Vonnegut is trying to, I guess, practical social theories through his work. He's not. I don't think that is totally not what he's doing. He's writing fictional novels, but there are themes of social and political theory being brought through that, or themes about who we are as people being put through these fictional works. And the whole thing of Lonesome No More, I think, is one way of looking at that, and of how division is bad and togetherness is better. So how does this relate to Cat's Cradle? Cat's Cradle is probably my favorite book by him that I have read. For most people, it's Slaughterhouse-Five, but for me, it's Cat's Cradle. The whole thing in there is there's a religion that is just not an awesome book. There's a religion which, in some ways, like Christianity, but it's very, very different. It's called Bokononism. And it's following this man called Bokonon, who they can never find, of course. I couldn't possibly talk about Cat's Cradle in a justifying way in this video, honestly. Bokononism had very many different concepts in it. One of them was the Karass, K-A-R-A-S-S. And you were put together in a bit of a family, or you were linked together, by some kind of Bokononist concept. And then there are many other concepts in there, like a Deprass, a Wampet, or a Granfalloner. A Granfalloner is somebody who's linked up by a stupid kind of link, like people who are from Indiana are called Hoosiers. Somebody who was on the plane to the island called San Lorenzo in that book. Someone who was on that plane was, trying to find more Hoosiers, and it was like, hey, he's a Hoosier, or he's a Hoosier, and linking people up via this, Indiana native, or people who were born in Indiana, and that's called a Granfalloon, or because it's a family or a linking up of people via some false or not useful thing. And lots of Karasses were brought together by a concept or a certain idea, not like being a Hoosier or a Husker or being Latino or being anything like that, but some kind of idea or concept that was somewhat related to Bokononism, or somehow did that. And I think that was called a Deprass. And then there was a person who did things the wrong way in the Karass. Someone who was doing things wrong or thinking things wrong, who was deviating from his Karass, and that was called a Wampet, I think either Wampet or Deprass, and that was a useful thing because they would see what was wrong via that. And the whole thing is, like, he was talking about how this is a very apocalyptic book. I'm not going to say how this book is apocalyptic because I don't want to ruin things, but it's apocalyptic in one thing, and once things did go apocalyptic, things were way better off than they otherwise would have been, and things were better off because of his Karass, because of the man's Karass, and things were just better off that way. So in that way, I think he's also trying to put forward some sort of a concept of, not a concept, but he's trying to put forward a theme of how it's better that if we're, in sort of some sort of togetherness rather than divided. So I don't know, I've gotten that from a couple of more of his novels, but in lesser forms. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Vonnegut a lot. So if you think I've misinterpreted something, or left something out, or did something wrong, because I'm talking about literature now because I want your input. I mean, I can read things online or read whatever I want to, but being a deconstructionist thinker as I am, I don't think of any one interpretation as being canonical or right. So please comment below, because I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to discuss with you about those two novels by Vonnegut. So thank you.